In today's video, we're going to go walk you through how you could book 10, 100, or 1,000 meetings with your ideal prospects. And I'll walk you through the funnel that's been responsible for doing this with my clients. I'll walk you through the cold email roadmap that I follow. And then finally, I'll share some tips that I use to convert positive interest into book meetings at a very high rate. So let's jump into this colorful funnel here. We have at the very top your sending volume, and then at the very bottom, you have the amount of total revenue. There's a couple of things that will impact every single stage of the funnel. There are four main parts. You have your sending volume, you have the way the market reacts to your emails. You'll then have your ability to nurture leads to ultimately book a meeting and have that prospect show up to the meeting. And then you have your wonderful sales skills that will ultimately convert that person from a meeting into a closed deal. So before we jump in, when it comes to sending volume, if you have a low amount of sending volume, you'll typically have a low amount of revenue directly coming from cold email. What we do in this case is we want to increase the amount of volume that we have. What we're not doing here is we're not sending emails one by one. We might be using an email sequencer, maybe Instantly, maybe SmartLead, maybe Email Bison, and we're using multiple domains and multiple emails on top of those domains. What we're not doing is we're not using our main domain. What we don't want to risk is having people mark our emails as spam. Whenever our email gets marked as spam 10, 20, 30 times, the emails that we want that reach our customers, it might have an invoice, it might have a project update for our clients. If it gets marked as spam from our promotion activities, the emails that we actually send to our real clients will ultimately go to their spam folder. We don't want that to happen. So what we do is we buy domains that are similar to our main domain. To put this into an example, if you look at google.com, that's the main domain or the root domain. We'll buy variations of that domain that might be googleusa.com, trygoogle.com, getgoogle.com. And so these emails that we buy or these domains are replaceable. If someone marks those domains as spam, it won't impact your main domain. So we are splitting up our marketing emails and then our client emails that we use to communicate with our team and then also our vendors or partners or clients. When it comes to the emails, I'll typically have 2 emails for one domain. So if I want to have 100 email accounts, I'll need to have 50 domains. Next, when it comes to your response rates, there are a few things that will impact the ability to succeed at this step of the cold email funnel, such as the list you're targeting, you have your offer, and then you also have your credibility. If you're messaging a list that's widely available, such as you pull a list, such as e-com store owners that have 20 employees that are in the USA, chances are because that data is so available, they get inundated with messages. So because there's a lot of noise in their inbox, the prospects that you send messages to, they'll have less attention for your emails because they're getting swamped with emails every single day. You won't believe it. Sometimes e-com store owners, they'll have 150 emails a day, even sometimes before noon, because that data is widely available. Everyone's trying to get inside their inbox and get their business. It's crazy. Next, if you have a good list that's not getting spammed 150 times a day, you'll have to have a solid offer. And this is something that I might cover in a different video. Then finally, you have your credibility. How have you helped a business similar to them in the past? And what makes you unique? That's typically the 2 things that will distinguish yourself inside of their inbox. Next, you have your ability to convert positive responses into showed meetings. What you could do here is you could respond to leads quickly. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have that initial excitement of whenever a prospect responds to you fade away. So if you respond to them very quickly, they remember you of what your initial service offering was or your product offering. If you wait 4 hours, they may forget. So if you have more speed, typically you'll be front and center in their mind. If you make it easy for them to say yes, such as you're not saying, go through this 12-step application form and then we might be able to have a meeting. If you just say, hey, you want to meet tomorrow at 3 p.m., it's a lot easier to say yes to compared to going through a 12-step form. Again, if you want to have prospects show up to your meetings, perhaps provide nurturing emails before. Provide some additional free value so that there's a little bit of reciprocation being done. Then finally, you have your sales team. I won't jump into this, but it comes down to your offer, how the discovery call goes, and then if there's true alignment between your product and then their pain points. Then you have for the amount of total revenue that you do close, you'll have the amount of transactions that you close, and then the order value. When it comes to the cold email roadmap, there are a few steps that you need to jump through in order to launch your campaigns, such as you need to buy your infrastructure. You could set up your emails one by one. You could use a reseller. It really depends how much involvement you want. From there, you have your strategy. You could see exactly what markets do you want to target. You could see which are the best contacts, the best titles that I want to go after. You'll have your offer. You might have multiple campaigns with different strategies. And that's completely fine. Perhaps for one email, you might be wanting to go after the founder of the company. And then the next campaign, you want to go after the directors at that company. You'll typically see which variables you'll need. Whenever you're pulling these lists, you could also use AI as well. Maybe you're using a tool like clay.com to get enriched data that you could use inside of these emails. You'll need to identify the way that you're going to get this data. And then finally, you could have proper naming conventions inside of the email sequencer that you are using. After you do those steps, you'll then have to build your list. You could use a number of databases like Apollo, StoreLeads, D7, DiscoLike. After you pull that list, you could add those leads into your CRM. You could enrich that data and validate emails inside of Clay. And then if you have any other custom scraping requirements, you could then do that. When it comes to the copy, I typically like to make my emails easy to say yes to. I'll think about the subject lines. I'll think about the way that I open up emails. You'll have your connecting lines that you'll typically send after that first line that you send a prospect that really shows them why you're reaching out, what your offer is, what makes you unique. Again, in a very concise manner. Then you'll have a call to action. You'll have your sign off, which may include a PS line. Sometimes people will double dip with that PS line, which helps them show why they are unique. Okay, what is next? You'll then create variations of your copy. You might create 3 different subject lines for every single email that you send. You might have 2 different call to actions. And what you're doing here is you want to see which one resonates with the market the best. Once you find copy that works, typically it'll work in the future as well. So you could recycle that same campaign again and again and again. It's not just a campaign that will work today, tomorrow, next month. It could most likely work next year as well. And you can recycle the hard work that you do to scrape the leads. You may have to validate the emails again just to make sure that the prospect didn't leave a company and go to another. But you could use the same building blocks that you're using in the future as well. Next, you could do something called Spintax. This randomizes the words, but still keeps the same messages. I have another video. It's called How to Use Spintax on my YouTube channel. Feel free to look at it. But what it does is it will appear to Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo that the emails that you are sending are all unique. For example, you might switch up the words like "Hi John" to "Hello John" to "Hey John." And that's all being done programmatically. After this, you'll have your subsequences. You could also set up some reply macros so that your team or yourself are able to respond to leads very quickly without having to write custom responses time and time again. Next up, a huge thing that's important to do at this point is to review your data weekly. You might want to see which subject line performed the best. You'll copy that, and then you'll be able to make similar variations to the winning subject line, also the winning call to action. And then over a process of time, what you're going to go do is if it takes you 500 emails or 1,000 emails to get one response, ideally what you want to do is drive that number of leads that it takes to get a positive response further down. What's next? You'll have your inbox management. You might put all of the leads that you have into something like Missive, into Slack, like Airtable, Google Sheets. You'll then have your team or yourself respond to leads. A lot of these apps, I know Instantly, for example, they do have an app. So if you're on the go, you get a notification of a positive response, you reply to it pretty quickly. And then finally, you want to follow up with leads again and again and again, because if they showed interest, perhaps they had to get into a meeting and they forgot about the reason why they wanted to respond to you in the first place. So if you get in front of them and the timing is a bit better, typically they will respond afterwards. There's always going to be some drop off at this stage of if they respond back to you once and they don't convert into a booked meeting, that's completely normal. However, you want to minimize the likelihood of that. One thing to note though, is I use this example of being effective at every single stage of this cold email roadmap. Think about it like this. If you have healthy infrastructure, if you have healthy strategy, healthy list building, healthy copy, healthy inbox management, you'll have a healthy campaign. However, if any single point in this roadmap breaks, such as your copy is terrible or your infrastructure isn't set up correctly, no matter how good the other parts of the system are, you're going to go have a constraint. You're going to go have a bottleneck. So think about it like this. If your copy is 100% and your inbox management is 100%, between these two, they multiply off each other and you'll have 100% between these two stages. However, if it's 0.6 or 0.6 or 60% effective, and then your inbox management is 60% effective, these compound off of each other. So the total effectiveness between just two parts of the cold email roadmap will come out to being 36% effectiveness. And that's not what you want. So it's extremely important that every single part, every single phase of your cold email funnel is optimized. When it comes to responding to leads, one thing that a lot of people don't do is they won't have an eye on this. They won't go into Slack, or they may not even set up Slack notifications or email notifications whenever a positive lead comes in. The likelihood of booking a lead whenever it goes down over time. If you wait 3 or 4 hours, your chances of booking a lead drops significantly. Think about it like this. You're sending emails to a prospect in the morning and you only get back to them in the afternoon. What might happen is they'll respond to you initially in the first morning block. And then they might go into 2 meetings, maybe 3 meetings, they'll have lunch. And then when it comes to the afternoon and John responds back to them, they may not remember exactly what John messaged them in the first place. So ideally, you want to keep the amount of time it takes to respond to a lead under 15 minutes. With that, when it comes to seeing this in practice, what it might look like is someone saying, hey, send me more info. You might have a response saying, hey, this is how I help companies. If you want to chat, feel free to let me know if any of the following times sound good. If you make it very easy for a prospect to say, hey, yes, you know what? Let's go with Tuesday at 4 p.m. That works. You'll book more meetings. But what happens if they don't respond? Well, you could follow up 2 or 3 more times, maybe even 4. And you might want to restate the same reason that perhaps caught their interest in the first place, or you may want to start a new email thread. Perhaps the timing just was off. Maybe they had to prepare for an important meeting for the very next day. So that's the overview of how I approach cold email. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll see you on the next video. Have a great one. And don't forget to subscribe if you can. It helps a lot. Cheers. Bye.